Hello and welcome to Mythmakers. Mythmakers is the podcast for fantasy fans and fantasy creatives brought to you by the Oxford Centre for Fantasy. My name is Julia Golding. I'm the director of the centre, but also I spend most of my time as an author writing in many genres, but I particularly love writing fantasy. Now, the centre has been going for just over a year now, and we've already seen large numbers of students go through our creative programme. But one of the most exciting spin-offs has been the setting up amongst the writers of their own support groups, which of course we're calling like a new version of the Inklings, which brings people from around the world together with like-minded folk to support each other in their creative journey after they've finished the courses with us. And we have quite a lovely little community that stays together and carries on chatting. One group celebrated the publishing of one of our tutors' books by having a special get-together. And I thought you'd enjoy to hear the conversation and just how coming together on a regular basis gives a sort of ease with professional authors and also gives a chance to get under the skin of what it's like to write a fantasy book. So please join us to listen in to the launch of James Nicol's, one of our tutors, new middle grade fantasy book, Spell Tailors. And the discussion is led by Elizabeth Clark, who was one of our very first students.
Well, I'm so happy to be here with all of you today. We have a larger group than we normally have, which is our Tolkien Writing Inklings group, which was founded from the very first course offered by the Oxford Centre for Fantasy with Julia and James. And I actually have a t-shirt back here where everyone kindly signed like rock stars. And James, see your beautiful signature there.
In the roots.
Yeah. And so it's nice for all of us. We have Lucy here and Christina, and I'm trying to see who else is new. So it's very special to have this chance to be here together. And I actually, I wrote something that way I wouldn't mess it up because I'm kind of nervous. And I think that brings back an old memory with my first tutorial with James, where I told him I was very nervous. And he said something unbelievably kind and thoughtful. And so put me and right at ease. And I think I've heard that from other people as well. So, I wanted to say welcome, happy September and early fall. We have a few leaves changing here on the trees. I can't wait for the orange, red, and yellow window panes to form in the forests. My name's Elizabeth. Most of you know that, Elizabeth Clark. I'm an alumnus of the Oxford Centre for Fantasy, having completed 2 courses, the first online fantasy course taught by Julia, James, MG, Rowena, and Lucy, and the 12-month novel in a year course. And like many of us, I dream of going to Oxford to see my friends and to be with Julia and attending an in-person course someday. I finished my first novel working with Julia, and I live on my farm in Bath, New Hampshire in the US with my 2 sons, although Charlie's off and away. And hi, Nicol, by the way, and Andrew. And I have a business in coastal Maine in Kennebunkport. I'm an enthusiastic and proud organizing member of the Project Northmore Tolkien Writing Inkling Group, TWIG, and we've all become dear friends now, which I'm unbelievably grateful for. And James, I include you in that special group. And I like to consider myself a hobbit. That's my dearest association. So thank you for being here, James, especially during a hectic pub period of your life. Today, we're celebrating and partying with our dear guest of honor, the distinguished and unbelievably talented and full of life, James Nicol. The Spell Tailors is published by the imaginative, fun, and highly respected Chicken House in Barry Cunningham. There it is. Yeah, and I hope you all get to read it, because I'm just telling you right from the beginning, you're going to get transported and you're going to care very much about Hen and want to hear his story. The Spell Tailors is James' first novel after his phenomenally successful and well-loved Apprentice Witch trilogy that was picked up for a television series. And also I should have mentioned, Chicken House is affiliated with Scholastic Books. It's owned by Scholastics in the United States. And I don't know if you know this, some of you know this and may have had the same experience I had, but my first independent moment picking a book out was age 6 through Scholastic, because they would come to the schools and they traditionally visit all schools across the United States and give you a beautiful pamphlet. So, I would see Apprentice Switch there, and Andrew saw it. And, it's a pretty amazing part of our literary history. So I just wanted to say that. What else? So as far as James's book goes, I still have to purchase the book itself, the physical book, but I've listened to the audiobook narrated by Alex Winfield, and I loved it. I loved his voices. It's amazing. I mean, you don't even think about him really doing voices. He's all those people. So it's just been an absolute put. And I had to push pause more than once because I didn't want to get too far ahead of myself today. And I didn't want to give you all spoilers. So only the magical introduction that won't take you too far and, wreck it for anybody. So finally, I want to welcome James again. He's a very kind, full of life spirit that all of us enjoy and appreciate with all our hearts. James, would you please tell us a bit about yourself and your writing background, whatever you pick, because remember, we're toasting you today and you're more important than Jeff Bezos. That's the truth.
Oh,
yeah.
Thank you.
Any day. You can sail on my yacht. I don't have one, but anyway, that's a bad joke. And I'm really interested in hearing about Hen. I instantly connected and cared about him. And so it's all good from here. So welcome, James.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I don't think I've ever had such a nice introduction in my life. I kind of feel like I'm at my own funeral. Somebody's reading me my eulogy. So that's lovely. Thank you very much.
That's okay. That's
yeah, that was really, really gorgeous. Thank you, Elizabeth. So my writing. So I guess sort of my writing journey. I'm not one of those people that I don't think I necessarily as a child understood the role of the author when it came to writing books. I don't quite know why. I guess it's partly because, unlike today, we didn't have authors come and visit schools. And so it was only when I was a grown-up that I actually met proper authors when I was working in a bookshop. And also, I'm a terrible speller, which if anybody's had an email from me, you will know. And I wasn't a very good reader at school. In fact, I was put into a slow readers group, which a teacher once assured me don't exist anymore. And then another teacher said, well, they do. We just don't call them slow readers groups. And so I felt like I was the complete opposite sort of person that would be an author until I started meeting authors. But I had always been a storyteller. I'd always loved telling stories, making up things, drawing maps of places that didn't exist, imagining the characters that lived there. And where I grew up, at the bottom of our garden, this sounds like I grew up in an Enid Blyton book, but it's not quite like that. There was a very small wood at the bottom of our garden, and all of our friends' houses also backed on to this wood, and it was like our extended playground. So we just used to climb over the fence and go and play in the wood. And I have 2 older brothers that would go off and do big brother stuff and kind of leave me at the first kind of opportunity. And I didn't mind. I quite liked that. I liked having my own space, playing my own games, being lost in my own world. And the wood for me was anything I wanted it to be. So it was a bit like my kind of extended film set or stage or whatever I wanted it to be. And so I think I was always telling stories all the way. And then it was just much later that I started to write them down. But I never showed anybody anything that I had written until I started working. Well, I did a short creative writing course through a organisation. I don't think the organisation itself exists anymore, sadly, because it was a very good creative writing course. Every module that you did, every kind of assignment was something completely different. So sometimes you would be writing, it was all aimed writing for children, but sometimes you might be writing for young adults. Sometimes you might be planning a picture book. You might do non-fiction for children, or a kind of magazine article, or he might just be developing a character. And it was fantastic. It was the kind of, I think it gave me the kind of the boost that I needed. My tutor was really encouraging, which I think was really helpful as well, because I hadn't dared to show anybody. And then obviously you have to when you're doing a writing course, as you all know. And I think that's what I said to you, Elizabeth, isn't it? On our one-to-one, it was like, I know exactly how you feel, because I knew what it was like sending those pieces off and then waiting for the feedback to come. And then I'd see her email ping into my inbox, and I couldn't look at the first time that I got feedback. I didn't read the email for about 3 days because I was terrified it was just going to be like laughter in email form and a kind of, why are you doing this? And obviously it wasn't. So, so I was doing that creative writing course, and I'd had this sort of half idea for the Apprentice Witch story. And my tutor, who incidentally was also called Julia, must be something about Julias and writing courses, said if I wanted, I could submit chapters from the book rather than do the remaining assignments. So she was the first reader for the Apprentice Witch book, really. And one of the things she said to me was to find, when I'd done the first draft and I'd edited the book as much as I could, was to find either an independent editor or somebody like that could give me constructive feedback, because that's what we all need. If we want to share our stories and make them as good as we can, we need feedback on those stories. And so I had that in the back of my mind as I carried on writing the book, and then found out about the Golden Egg Academy, which I then was lucky enough to be accepted onto their course. This was back in 2013, which feels like a million years ago now. And it was when I was working with my editor at Golden Egg, Bella Pearson, who had worked with Philip Pullman, and I don't even need to give you a longer list of people she'd worked with. She'd worked with Philip Pullman, there we go. And she now runs her own publishing company called Guppy Books. And she had heard about a scholarship with Chicken House, where they would basically give you some money to pay towards your Golden Egg course. And so she sent them the Apprentice Witch as it was then, with a view to them giving me some money. And to cut a very long story short, I could do a whole different conversation about being accepted by Chicken House. I had a couple of meetings with Barry Cunningham, who I never thought for a million years would be interested in The Apprentice Witch, because he's the publisher who originally published the Harry Potter books, and this was a book about a witch on a broomstick, and why would he want to do that again? And so he gave me some very good feedback, really useful feedback, which I responded to. But I kind of had in the back of my head the whole time that I wasn't going to get this scholarship. But I thought, well, I've had these two amazing meetings. I've had this amazing feedback that, has cost me nothing really, and has been really useful. And then I had this phone call where I kind of had worked myself up to the point that they were going to say, thanks for trying, but we're not going to go any further with this. And it wasn't Barry actually who told me, it was Rachel Lyshant, was one of the editors. Excuse me. And she said, we're not going to offer you the scholarship. And I said, no, I didn't think that was going to happen. And she said, but we would really like to publish your book, which is a very rare thing. And I never discount how lucky I was that was how The Apprentice Witch kind of came into being. And obviously we went on from there. So in terms of moving on to the Spell Tailors, which came out on Thursday, I had finished writing the Apprentice Witch books. I finished, the third one was published in 2019. And it was actually when I was just about to publish the second book that we were discussing what I was going to do next. So Chicken House had already asked me to write the trilogy. So we were saying, well, what's going to be the thing after Apprentice Witch? And I think they had a very clear idea in their head about where they wanted me to go. And so they kind of half gave me a brief, but asked me to kind of come up with the idea myself, which I did. And they liked it, but they wanted changes to it. And so we did the changes to it. And then I went off and I wrote it. And I did a couple of drafts and it just wasn't landing right for me or for Chicken House. And so they very kindly said, look, just go away and write whatever it is that you want to write, and come back to us, which was wonderful. And, you know, brilliant that they had that confidence that I could go away and deliver, because, you know, when you have that conversation, as nice as they were about it, when they're saying, look, this isn't working, you kind of think, well, perhaps that's it. Perhaps those 3 books were all it was ever going to be. And so, but I had this idea of memories being kind of caught in weaving or woven fabrics. As I was writing The Apprentice Witch, on one of my Golden Egg courses, we were kind of encouraged to just write something completely different from what we were writing at the time. And I had this kind of bizarre memory thing in the back of my head, and I was quite keen to involve a yak in the story somewhere, which the yak didn't make it into the book. I'm sorry, everybody. So the yak will have to be featuring somewhere later. And kind of in the breaks of doing the Apprentice Witch books and editing and writing, I would go back to this memory weavers. I think it was called Memory Weavers originally. This Memory Weavers idea, and tinker with it and think about the characters and where the story would take place. And then obviously I'd go back to Apprentice Witch, and then it would be shelved for a bit longer. And when I was kind of going back to the drawing board, I was kind of thinking of this story that, again, was partly, it was kind of thinking about my grandmother. So there's always grandmothers. A friend of mine asked me recently, in all your books, is there going to be a grandmother? And are they going to have like a strange sort of Italian sounding name? And I said, well, maybe, although the next book I'm writing has neither. So no. But I spent a lot of time with my grandmothers growing up. And so they kind of, you know, they appear quite happily as characters in the book. And they just feel like very magical people to me. And so but when my grandmother was younger, she had been a very ineffective parlour maid in a country house. I think she got fired after about 10 days because she was just the worst. And I sort of had this wonderful idea about this young girl who goes to be a parlour maid in this country house, but there's something magical also connected with this story. And part of the magic was to do with the box of clothes that they find in the house. And when the children put these clothes on, they sort of transform into different people. It's like the ultimate dressing up. So they put these clothes on and become completely different people. And so I pitched this idea to my agent, and she said, well, I really like the idea of the magical clothes, but the rest of it isn't doing it for me. And then gave me a long list of reasons why I shouldn't pursue that as an idea. But she said, I think there's something there about the magical clothes. Go away and think about that. And that was really the best bit of advice, really, because I was thinking, well, what could I do with these magical clothes? And then suddenly I was like, the memories and the magic and the clothes. I just need to smoosh them all together. And that's the idea. And I quickly drew up an outline. So I normally, when I'm for my contracts with Chicken House, all I have to show them usually is either an outline for a story or a sample of writing from that story, because obviously hopefully they know I can write, and they just want to know what it is that I'm planning to write, and normally that's where we go from. And so I sent them this outline, which you won't be able to see, but it's kind of, you know, it's like a very extended blurb of the book, has all the details about what's going to happen, the main characters, the main kind of thread, of the plot. And I also include some little pictures that have been my inspiration. So you can see I don't know how well you can see those. There's some embroidery and a beautiful coat, and then kind of some other visual references for characters and settings and things like that. And it was the easiest book I've ever sold to Chicken House, because normally they come back and say, oh, we like this bit of the story, we like this bit of the story, but we want more of this and we want more of that. So go away and redo the outline and then send it back to us. And that might take 3-4 months to kind of bash that out. Whereas they saw that and they never asked for any changes. That's not to say we didn't when we were editing, but they basically loved it. And actually my agent said at the time, if they don't want it, I can sell it to 10 different publishers. Don't worry. So that kind of boosted my confidence back up again, because I felt a bit sort of deflated after the book that hasn't gone anywhere yet. And so I started to work on the Spell Tailors. And as Elizabeth, I don't know who saw, just before we officially started, Elizabeth was showing us some beautiful garments that are from her family kind of archive, I suppose is the best way to describe it, isn't it, Elizabeth? It's a beautiful pelisse jacket. Is it a pelisse jacket, Julia, or is it just a pelisse?
It's just a pelisse.
Just a pelisse. There we go. Oh, Elizabeth's showing you. It's beautiful. So it's like the sort of short jackets that they wear in Jane Austen adaptations, and obviously did back in the day. So similarly, I don't have a lot of items that belong to family members, but I do have these 2 biscuit tins. And they came to me. The red one belonged to my mum, and the blue one belonged to one of my grandmothers. And they came to me after both of them had sadly passed away. And the blue one, I knew what was in both of them, really, but I kind of forgotten. So the blue one was always filled with photographs of people, postcards, letters. There's even a book of common prayer in here that belonged to my great uncle, I think it was. And in the front, I don't think you'll be able to see. It's so old, it's falling to pieces. I don't know if the light will catch it. He's written some prayers in pencil, and you can only really see it when the light hits it. So there's all these little artifacts, and I went through them once when we first moved into this house. I thought, I'm going to sort through that tin, because I knew there were bits in there that there were photographs of my dad, my grandparents, great grandparents that I knew of, and so I sorted the contents into some piles. So I had stuff that I knew who it was over here, but then I had this bigger pile of photographs and letters and things that I have no idea who they belong to. So they could be family members, they could be just friends, very distant relatives, next door neighbours, who knows. But in the Spell Tailors, there's a whole bit of the story in that Hen thinks he knows his family history in the shop and in the house where they live. So the Spell Tailors shop has the apartment above where the family will live, and in this grand staircase that goes up from the shop into the apartment is the family gallery. So it has paintings, photographs of all of his ancestors going right back to the first Spell Tailor. And it's like, that's where you want to be. If you've achieved something as a Spell Tailor, your image goes on the family gallery and you're kind of assured your place in history. But what Hen discovers is that there's other family members that never appear on that wall. And that's what made me and that was sort of inspired by these photographs, because there are all these family, I've been told family stories about uncles that died in the Second and First World War, cousins that did things, but so many other family members that I'll never know their stories for. And then in the red biscuit tin is the other thing, and this is So Elizabeth has probably got to this bit already. So Hen does find a biscuit tin in the attic when he's banished to the attic for upsetting his uncle once too often. And in the attic, he uncovers a biscuit tin that has a garment inside it. And the garment has a particular type of spell, a memory spell stitched into it. And this biscuit tin is full of pieces of lace, sewing equipment. There's like little pouches for needles and things, and even this beautiful little blouse that I think it's sort of Edwardian. I'm not sure. It's very short. It would go under the police jacket quite nicely, I should think. You'd need something else underneath it. And there's also, what you can't appreciate is this beautiful smell. At some point, some perfume or something must have been spilled on these things, and it's like somebody's just put it on. It's so beautiful. So there's all these, like this beautiful beading that I guess was there to be stitched onto something. And it just, again, it made me think that these things, these items belong to somebody, I'm presuming, to family members. My mum never told me where they came from. And so I don't know the stories of who they belong to, but kind of putting those together with those pictures and those stories that I don't know, I imagined my own stories for them. And that became the heart, really, of what happens in the spell Tailors. What else do you want to know, Elizabeth? Oh, you're on mute.
Okay, that's classic. Of course, I want to, anyone. Actually, James, let me jump ahead for 1 second, and then thank you for asking. How would you like people to ask you questions? I
don't mind if people want to put them in the chat, or if people want to ask them to me, with their mouths, that's fine as well. Okay. People want to hold up a piece of paper to the screen. However, not sign language though, or interpretive dance, because it's, you don't have all evening.
So I wanted to, what you just described, I absolutely love that in your book. That transformative moment where Hen finds the box, and all of a sudden it's like the sky is lifting up, and he's I forget what, I think it was it silk? What does he feel? I forget.
Yeah, it's a silk sort of half finished item, isn't it?
It's the fabric. Yeah.
I think the fabric changed a lot, because I suddenly realized during an edit that I had an awful lot of velvet. Nearly every garment I wrote about seemed to be velvet for some reason, so I was like, to pick a different fabric.
Well, I like the velvet reference, actually, because that's a very strong on a lot of levels fabric. But so I'm going to go back to what I said, no spoilers here, but the beginning is so rich that it's fine to just talk about the beginning. And I was going to ask you about, there was a lot I wanted to ask you. I had it written down about the Dinelli. Is that the right? The Dinelli family?
Yeah. And
it goes back 400 years. Is that right? And the story begins, I believe, in 1776. Is that correct?
That's when the Spell Tailors business was established.
It was established, right, in 1776. Yeah. And so where does that all begin? The 400 years ago, what was the first, real movement of, why the family? Of course, I know the story about the need for spell tailors, which I found was fascinating, like the protective stitch and all of that. So where did you get that idea from, James? It's so amazing, the idea of special stitches being put in clothing and the magic of that.
In earlier versions, without giving away too many spoilers, Hen, there was more than one garment that Hen finds in the attic, and so he went into different memories. And at one point, he actually goes into the memory that revealed the truth of Domenico Dinelli, who was the first spell tailor, this kind of canny, wily business businessman who realized actually that the magic in the world was shifting or changing or fading slightly, and to preserve it, they realized that if they stitched the spells into fabric, it somehow preserved the magic, but also in doing it, it made a different type of magic, and it imbued those stitches and the fabric themselves with magical properties. And so he realized, oh, we can turn this into a money-making scheme. We can't be sorcerers anymore, but we can adapt. And so he's the sort of canny businessman. And through that line, through the Denelli line, we end up with Hen, who himself is now looking to how he can mostly get his picture on the family gallery. That's what he's thinking about at the beginning of the story. But not too far in, we realize that the business might be in peril when Uncle Bertie, Aunt Lucia and Cousin Connie descend on Hen and Nana's spell tailor shop because they've had to close their own through mysterious circumstances, and also because there's a competitor who's making spell garments in a factory, or in factories. But Hen loves fixing things, mending things, reimagining how things can be assembled. He likes to recycle clothes. But Uncle Bertie doesn't see that as a future for the business, because why would somebody have something mended? Why would somebody buy something new if they can just have the old thing mended? Their business is making new garments, not fixing old ones. And so he just doesn't see Hen's point of view to start with. And yet, obviously, there's a quite a clear link between poor Hen and Domenico, although actually it wasn't really Domenico. Shh. Perhaps we'll find out in a later book the true history of the spell tailors, but that's what everybody thinks, is that it's Domenico who was the canny person, and that's not quite how I truly imagined it. So that's where they've been established. The family, big family that's kind of gone their separate ways. So some stayed on these islands called the Scillian Islands, which was kind of, a not too far leap from thinking they were sort of a vaguely Sicilian family, if it was this world. Some came to a country called Ingle, and established the spell tailor shop there under the Denelli name. But then as we trace the kind of immediate family tree back, Hen's Nana has only come from Sicilia sort of as a young girl, to take over the shop from her great uncle, and obviously she's then had her own family, and Uncle Bertie will be the one that takes over in time. So that's why there's the tension, really, is that Nana's still there, but she's older and she doesn't really want the hoo-ha of running the family business. Uncle Bertie wants to run the family business, but clearly isn't doing the best job at it, and Hen just wants to make clothes, but then discovers this new kind of, or old kind of stitch, that could be is very important to the family, but could be important beyond the family and could save the business as well.
And there's an interesting part about Hen's parents, because we don't quite know, what's going on there. He's being raised by his grandmother, who's a very skilled spell tailor, but still, this is the beginning. We discover it's a major desire to create your own magical stitch.
Yeah.
Okay, something unique. And she still hasn't done that yet, even though she's kind of a master. Is that right, James? She's kind of a...
Yeah, I mean, she's obviously been spell tailoring her whole life, but she likes to experiment. And throughout the book, we see her knitting her famous red scarf, which she's always vaguely disappointed when she finishes, and you don't find out until the very end why she's always disappointed with the scarves, and she just gives them away to people in a kind of, you have it, because it's not really very good. So with Hen's parents, this was more of a logistical thing. So originally I had Hen's parents be divorced, and he lived with his mum and his nana in the spell tailor's shop. But then I realised when I then introduced Uncle Bertie, Aunt Lucia, and Connie, there were just too many people in some of the family scenes, and I get really confused when I have too many people in a scene. I learnt early on not to have too many people in a scene. And also there was the struggle between having the kind of the tension with Uncle Bertie and why his mum wouldn't just step in and deal with that, to kind of say, look, Hen's my son, back off. And also having the lovely nurturing Aunt Lucia who just worries constantly about everybody. That there was then too many people mothering him, and you kind of think, well, he's not gonna do what he needs to do because he's got too many people looking after him. And so I killed them both off. And I thought, oh God, no, I can't keep killing kids' parents off in books. It's just it felt a bit too easy. And also, it's a bit expected in a way that your main character's parents are probably dead or kind of distracted elsewhere. So I decided to go for the distracted elsewhere, made them scientists, so they're not interested in spell tailoring, and they're off doing their experiments who knows where. So we only get contact from them through letters and things, and Hen sort of keeps in contact with them that way. Again, in an early draft, I did have them appear towards the end, but it seemed rather pointless to have them just appear at the last moment. And actually worked better for it not to be that they turned up. Interesting ways to dispatch parents. We could do like a whole, I don't know, paper on that, Julie. We could do a whole seminar. Dispatching parents in middle grade literature.
Yeah, the first rule is get rid of the parents.
Yeah.
As you say, it doesn't have to be death, or make the parents the problem.
Yeah.
That's if you're going to keep them around. If they're, as you say, if they are there to nurture and look after, it's kind of like end of story. I'm going to go and have an adventure. No, you've got to do your homework.
Yeah. Or, oh no, this happened. And the mum and dad are like, oh, I'll ring the police. Yeah. Oh, end of story. So that's why I sent the parents off to be scientists and do something else. So, and obviously, as I said before, I spent a lot of time with my own grandmothers growing up, and that was a very important relationship to me. And I think, in lots of ways now, perhaps with more, people don't often live as close to their grandparents. They don't spend as much time with grandparents or older people particularly, whereas I did growing up. We had quite elderly neighbours, and I don't know, I love old people, and so I think they're underestimated in the real world, but also often underestimated or just made for like comedy relief in children's books. They're kind of like, I remember saying to my nana once, shame, why can't, because I don't know if you've got to there's one of my actual memories of my grandmother is in the book where she ran through the local park and she was swinging around lampposts like we were in some sort of ridiculous musical. And it's like, to this day, it makes me absolutely howl with laughter to think about it. And I remember saying to my nana when I was probably, well, I shouldn't have said it either way, whatever age I was, but I wasn't very old. And I said to her, why can't you just be like other old people and sit in the corner and dribble? Which is obviously not what old people do. And certainly not what either of my grandmothers did. So, yes, shame on me.
Yeah, so I'm actually I support you in what you said with my whole heart about older people, and I kind of crusade on that subject actually a little bit, especially going back to the United States. And poor Charlie, you're gonna have to listen to this, my son. But yeah, I mean, wisdom, personality, experience, ready to have fun, no holding anything back, and a deep love comes with a lot of older people. And never discount that or underestimate it. I mean, excitement is great, youthful excitement and enthusiasm, and that is special as well. But what you're talking about can parallel that and be even better sometimes. So honestly, yeah. So that's a nice thing to mention. And I love that in a story. Absolutely.
I think I saw some questions pinging in the chat. Should we have a look?
There's a
Bernie's
question.
asking when I'm planning to visit the US and especially in New Hampshire. I would love to come and visit, Bernie. I don't know when that's going to happen, but that would be great. Oh, Isa has a question. How and when did you know what age group to write the story for? So I think there was no question really with the Spell Tailors on the back of The Apprentice Witch that it wouldn't be for the same age group really. I think that particularly when although it's not my second book, it's my fourth book, I think with the next book after your kind of series, you probably wouldn't go too far outside of that same age group. Although obviously it's been quite a gap between the Third Apprentice Witch and this, so I've probably lost quite a lot of my Apprentice Witch readers. They've probably grown up and moved on to other things anyway, so it probably wouldn't have been too much of a problem. But I think certainly Chicken House would have expected me to continue with that similar age group for that book. But initially, when I started to write The Apprentice Witch, the idea I thought it would be a YA book, and I don't know why, because I do read YA, but I don't read a lot of it. It's certainly not what I'm passionate about. And I'm passionate about writing for middle grade readers, because I think those are the books, when I think of the books that really impacted on me to start with, it was those books that I read during that sort of 7 to 12 sort of age range. Things like the 101 Dalmatians and the Narnia books, massive impact on me. And so that's why I write for that age group really. I think they're the books that you'll remember always and hopefully share with your own children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, and then talk about, when you're older and go, oh, can you remember when you first read, I don't think, I'm not saying my book's as good as the Narnia books, but it would be nice to think that somewhere down the line, two people might go, oh, do you remember when you read The Spell Tailors or The Apprentice Witch? That would be lovely. So I think that's the main reason for writing for that age group.
I see in the Swedish marketing of the book, it's 6 to 9 years old. That will be younger than The Apprentice Witch.
Yeah, it differs from country to country as well, Isa, because I know with the Apprentice Witch books, they were published in Spanish, but they were much more aimed at teen readers, actually. And that's to do with reading levels in different countries and different markets. So the covers are more sophisticated than probably than the cover that we had in the UK, because they were looking more at the kind of the young teenager rather than the preteen market. So I think that has an impact on where your book's being published and what the reading age is, rather than the age range, the reading age of the children reading them.
So, Tania, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say a quick thank you to James for being so forthcoming about your struggles as a child with reading and writing. One of my boys, my middle son, who is now 12, he's our ADHD superstar, and he still has a really hard time writing letters, actually just forming the letter and having it go in the right direction and reading. And yet he is our most creative. This kid's destined for something creative. And so I always, as his mom, and I know so many other moms that have kids that are these, we kind of refer to them as the IEP kids, the individual education plan. So they have to get their help through school, they have their IEP, and it's so hard for him. So I love finding these examples such as yourself, where, that part didn't come easy as a child, and yet you're still, so much of your adult life is there. So thank you for sharing that. I hope you continue to share that story with lots of kids.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things I do talk about when I go to school visits, the fact that I wasn't, I wasn't a good reader at school, and I still, I still am a slow reader. I cannot read quickly. I have a friend who could read, she could have read the Spell Tailors probably in half a day. I cannot do that. And I think partly it's from not having been a very proficient reader as a child, but also something to do with being used to reading, because I've worked in bookshops and libraries all my life as well, reading out loud to people. So I always read something as I'm reading it out loud with the pauses, and I even do the silly voice in my head. So I think that's also part of the thing as well. But the thing I also say to children these now is that there are so many different ways to tell stories. Books are one of the ways, but then that's not the only way to tell a story. There's graphic novels, there's films, there's, the computer games now are so much more sophisticated than they were when I was a child. And it's all rich, amazing storytelling. So it doesn't mean that if you want to tell stories that you have to sit and physically write them. You can find a different way to tell stories. It doesn't have to be that way if that doesn't feel right for you, because it's not going to fit for everybody at all. Good luck to him. Charlie asked a question in the chat and said, are you sticking more with series writing, or would you consider standalone novels? So this currently is a standalone novel, because the next book I'm writing isn't the continuation of the Spell Tailors story. Initially, Chicken House asked if I had an idea for a second book, which I do, and they were quite happy with the suggestion, but they also wanted to look at having a completely different book. They're obviously thinking more from a business point of view and what they can sell to different publishers around the world, because that's how they make their money, and they make use of money as well. And so the book I'm writing at the moment, in between doing everything else, is not the second Spell Tailors book. It's something completely different. It's a bit mad as well. I'm not going to lie, it's a bit crazy, but they seem to like it. So we'll see. And hopefully that will come out either late next year or early 2024, depending on how quickly I get on with my draft and editing and things like that.
So I'm going to follow up with, we're going to do a bit more of the nepotism here with my son, Charlie. So James, I heard a nice interview, a brief one with Barry Cunningham, talking about your potential TV show. And is that still something? I hope that's in the works. I know I thought I'd ask you, because I know you kind of have to wait and see what happens. And so I wanted to hear, your thoughts on that, because that was really exciting. And I wanted to add, it was super exciting because Charlie loved the books, because Scholastic had these books, and it was the show House of Anubis. I don't know if you saw that. And apparently there's a connection with your potential show.
Yeah. It was just before the second Apprentice Witch book came out that I had a call from Barry. It was in the throes of, we had a terrible winter storm back in 2018 called The Beast from the East, that kind of brought the country to its knees. Ruined my book launch completely, but I was still working full time at the time as well, and I was in one of my libraries back down in Cambridgeshire for a meeting, and in a break in this meeting, I was making coffee or something, my phone rang, and it was Barry, and he occasionally rings to sort of ask me something or tell me something or stuff like that, and so I didn't think too much of it, and he said that there was a TV production company that were interested in possibly taking on The Apprentice Witch with a view to turning it into a TV series. and that the chap, a guy called Tim, would be at my book launch when it was rescheduled, and I was, pressure to then be sparkling and brilliant and clever like that. And Tim, who works for a company called Lime Pictures, has previously worked on House of Anubis and loads of other stuff. He also worked on, I discovered, and I don't know if this will mean anything to anybody else apart from Julia, I'm sure will know, Pingu. So, that was fine. Anything he said was good with me. Pingu's like a little claymation penguin. I can't even say penguin now. It's a bit bizarre. So I met Tim, and we had a nice chat. And then it was probably, that was sort of February, March, and around about Easter, I got a contract for the initial kind of period for optioning the rights for the books. So that was 2018. Here we are in 2022 and still no TV series, but there has been lots of stuff going on in the background, a lot of stuff that I can't tell you about because TV executives will swing through my writing room window, put a sack over my head and beat me about the head with, I don't know, I was going to say a DVD box, but who has DVDs anymore? A Netflix subscription, probably. So there's lots of development going on, but TV is much slower than publishing, which is already a very slow entity. But there is stuff, it is still going through. People are still working on it. Some very exciting people are working on it, which again, I can't tell you about. What can I tell you? I've seen a pilot episode script for the first episode, which was very exciting. But yeah, that's kind of, it's one of those things that when people ask me about it, thank you for asking about it, I get excited and I get to tell you a little bit about it. But when it's not happening, it goes back in its biscuit tin, goes under the bed, and I don't think about it because I think you could probably drive yourself quite mad thinking, when's it happening? And it's so out of my control that I just, unless I see an email from Tim or he rings, I don't really think about it too much unless somebody is kind enough to ask. And then I have to kind of say little bits, but I can't tell you all of the stuff I wish I could tell you. But yes, it's still trundling nicely along, and hopefully soon should go into full production, at which point you will hear me all the way in New Hampshire screaming with excitement, and I'll tell you all the details then.
And we'll be screaming back at you. And thank you for opening the biscuit tin again for us and getting us excited, honestly. So that sounds really good, James. That sounds good.
Yeah, I think it's an exciting thing, and I think it's rare for it to go. Certainly Barry and my agent always think it's very rare for things to get this far down the line. Barry was saying that with Chicken House, they've had 2 other series that have been sort of in pre-production. He said, I haven't quite reached the pinnacle of one which was in pre-production for, I think, 7 years. He says, so I've got a bit of a way to go before it gets to that. And I don't even think that's even gone into production yet. So they must have just been slightly ahead of me. And I can't remember the name of the book that he told me. But I think, these things do happen. And they can be slow. And obviously, of course, we've had COVID in the middle, which probably hasn't helped things either. So yeah, we'll just wait and see. Perhaps by the time it's ready and on the telly, my little girl will be old enough to sit and watch it.
I just want to point out, Nancy's got a really interesting question in the chat.
Ooh.
Have a look at that.
Thank you, James.
My question is about developing the idea. I know you spoke a bit to this already. So the premise of the story, i.e. the spell Tailors, is an awesome foundation, but how do you develop all the characters' personalities to make the story interesting and hold together? Do you make a family tree ahead of time? Are you a plotter or a pantster? I'm a plantster, Nancy, which means I make my plan, which is like what I showed you. Where's it gone? My outline. And by the time I've kind of worked on that for maybe, a month, 6 weeks, 2 months maybe, and it's kind of been pinged backwards and forwards between me, and I might share it with some writer friends to get their sort of input, obviously share it with my agent, show the publishers. By that point, I think it's so fixed in my head what the story is that I tend to just set that aside and then start writing and not worry too much about what I put in there. And so far, touch wood, nobody's come back to me and said, hang on a second, this is not what you put in your outline. I don't veer too far off track, but obviously you think you do change things as you're writing the story, just because you suddenly realise actually it's not working. When you get to the actual writing of it, you realise that it's not going to work for whatever reason. In terms of developing characters, I think it's a very good question. I think a lot of that comes with working with my editor. I think that's one of the things that often comes through with working with my editor. And that might be, and she often does it in terms of posing questions to me. So it's not about her saying, you need to make your character do this to develop them. But she might say, let's think about, what somebody's motivation actually is behind this action, or what's this person thinking while this is going on, and it's those sorts of things that then make you think, oh, hang on a second, I need to draw this out a little bit. But I think also, hopefully I've learned as I've written 3 books and developed the characters over those individual books and over the arc of the 3 books as well. So I think developing the characters feels not easier thing to do, but it does feel like it's something I'm more aware of myself when I'm writing and editing myself, to kind of look at those things as well. And also I think for me, like I said before, not having a cast that's too sprawling makes that a lot easier, because you can see how those things are shifting and changing as the story goes on. For example, with Spell Tailors, there's a kind of relationship shift between Hen and Connie. So although they're cousins, they've not spent an awful lot of time together, and their relationship to begin with is quite frosty. And then it's through their actions and through what happens in the story that they become closer. And then again, something happens and sort of pulls that apart a little bit. Did somebody just gasp in shock? And then it's about knitting that back together again. Knitting, pun intended. And then Uncle Bertie, he's sort of all over the place because he's mega stressed with the whole trauma of the business and things, and his relationship with Hen. I think it's fun as well. It's fun doing all of those things, developing the characters and changing them and thinking about how they're going to play out. But it comes to me, I don't think about it too much in advance. It comes through the writing and the editing, that bit of the development. I can't always plan how somebody's going to be. That comes as you start to write them and get to know them through writing them. That might sound a bit, woo, he's a bit crazy, thinks the characters are talking to him. I don't think that, but they do. Shh, be quiet.
James, on that happy, free-spirited moment, I think I guess we're going to transition into the Rings of Power discussion. And I thought we'd all give James a very Shire-like toast and wish him well. And I know you don't need another eulogy, James, but I'm sorry. we just all love you so much, and that's the truth. And I want to wish you well. And I love the book. Absolutely love the book. And I hope everybody gets to enjoy it. And it will be one of those special books that I put in a spot and revisit. And I just loved everything. I mean, there's so much I wanted to talk about, but it would just be about even the cloth, the magical cloth book. That's cloth that Hen knows about, that has all the secret spells. And I just loved it. I loved everything about it. So just wanted to say that. And I want to wish you well. And you look well. I wanted to add that. You do well under pressure, James Nicol. Because
don't forget, I've got that Zoom filter cranked well up, and I've got a ring light here, so I look like an orc, actually.
Far from it, but fine. All orcs should look so good, right, guys?
I look like an orc with a perm.
So here's to James Nicol, and we want to wish you all things healthy and well, and happiness and joy to you and your family. And thank you so much, James, for visiting with us today. And thank you.
It's lovely to see everybody again. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you very much for listening to this episode of Mythmakers. If you'd like to come and join us on one of the courses, the next 6-week online fantasy course starts in October. Details can be found on the link on our show notes or on our website. Also, we didn't have a chance to ask where in all the fantasy worlds would be the best place to be something, which is usually how we finish. So I thought, in honour of James's book, I'd ask the question, where in all the fantasy worlds is the best place to be a tailor? And thinking about this, I actually went old school. And one of my favourite children's books for illustrations is The Tailor of Gloucester, which you may remember is that beautifully illustrated story about mice in a tailor's shop. And I think for me that always leaves me with a very warm glow, showing how fantasy can be also a form of fairy story when you're little, with the magic of imagining creatures coming in and doing the work for you, which of course is wonderfully attractive, for the idea of the tiny stitches. So that would be my pick. We'd love to hear from you where you would pick as the best place to be a tailor. Thank you very much for listening. Until next time, goodbye.
Thanks for listening to Mythmakers Podcast, brought to you by the Oxford Centre for Fantasy. Visit oxfordcenterforfantasy.org to join in the fun. Find out about our online courses, in-person stays in Oxford, plus visit our shop for great gifts. Tell a friend and subscribe wherever you find your favourite podcasts worldwide.